Welcome. Today, we will delve into the secrets of Tibet, a place where ancient traditions and religious codes have seemingly shaped a unique way of life. But behind the narrow walls of monasteries and palaces lie phenomena that challenge stereotypes and raise questions. Why is polyandry widespread in a region known for strict monastic discipline? How do family practices coexist with religious norms? And what do the incredible figures, polyandrous shares, reaching up to 90% in some villages, actually mean? Hidden within this mystery are secret traditions, special family rituals, symbols, and gestures that dictate the rules of life and death. Now, as these hidden mechanisms face threats, it is important to understand why this tradition endures and what lessons it offers today. In this investigation, we will piece together all these contradictions and reveal the true picture of those who live by these special rules, far beyond common concepts. Are you ready to see what is hidden behind cultural facades? Then let's begin. Nowadays, when mentioning Tibet, images of towering snowy mountains, monasteries, candles, and prayer bells immediately come to mind. It is hard to imagine that behind this romantic and spiritual illusion lies a far more complex and contradictory reality. This enigmatic land is not only a center of spirituality and enlightenment, but also a place where deeply rooted family practices go beyond usual notions of marriage and relationships between men and women. Perhaps the most shocking of these practices is polyandry, widely spread, accepted by part of the population, and involving multiple spouses. It is about these family models that defy stereotypes and raise numerous questions, that this story will focus. Until recently, it was believed that Tibet was a place of strict, conservative, monotonous orthodoxy, where monasteries and palaces seemed carved from stone, embodying centuries-old rigid codes, and where religion is the sole source of moral rules. This version of reality presented a picture of monks praying at altars, pilgrims walking dusty trails, and a strict hierarchy of spiritual mentors, rooted in centuries of tradition. But reality is often much more complex and beyond stereotypes. There are facts demanding special attention. One of these is the remarkably high prevalence of polyandry, a practice that directly contradicts Western models of family life and perhaps the most fundamental spiritual norm of chastity. Within Tibetan traditions, this practice is well known and accepted. Its scale is astonishing. In some regions, the proportion of women with multiple brothers reaches nearly 90%. This is not fiction or a local phenomenon, but a systemic part of life, embedded in specific cultural codes and, in most cases, projected onto social and family structures. What explains the widespread popularity of polyandry in Tibet? Why do these families, often facing harsh climate conditions, heavy manual labor, and a constant shortage of resources, prefer this particular form of marital ties, which seems foreign to the rest of the world? What illogical traditions, at first glance, lie behind these practices, allowing them to persist and thrive despite potential social and legal contradictions? The answers to these questions are not as simple as they might appear at first glance. Many of them are connected to the peculiarities of the agricultural way of life, historical conditions, and social mechanisms that existed in regions distant from the center of Tibetan life. In mountain settlements where the land is riddled with stones and seasonal work is the only means of sustenance, family structures capable of increasing resource efficiency have taken on a special form. In such conditions, where the birth and upbringing of children are considered individual responsibilities, and assistance in strenuous farming work is vitally important. Practices that help preserve the kinship and enable collective effort have developed increasingly. In these circumstances, a family structure became common where husbands are brothers from the same family, and one wife acts as a connecting link among them. This union ensures not only the continuation of the lineage, but also efficient management of household affairs, land use, and even information exchange within communities. Yet, the most astonishing fact is not only the scale of polyandry's spread, but also its recognition within religious and cultural traditions. Although Western moral principles categorically reject such forms of marriage, they occupy a significant place in Tibetan texts, rituals, and oral tradition. This system even has its own ritual perception. Wives with horns on their headdresses, symbolizing the number of husbands, as a sign of good luck and prosperity, representing a union with nature and spirits. In some regions, whole cultic rituals associated with the unification of several brothers and wives within a single family cluster are sometimes performed, perceived as demonstrations of strength and harmony within the family, which facilitate farming and childbirth. The discovery of these facts challenges conventional notions of the three fundamental values in culture: monogamy, chastity, and the one-to-one model of family relations. Why, despite the canonical norms of religion, did such practices become widespread and even sanctioned in certain parts of Tibet? What social, economic, and spiritual mechanisms trigger and sustain these family forms? And more importantly, what role do religion, customs, and practical survival considerations, so to speak, play in this process? And can it be said that they determine the survival of the way of life itself? Studying these phenomena, researchers often encounter an unspoken truth embedded within family and ritual connections. Polyandry is considered dangerous to Western concepts, but within other contexts, it is perceived as a natural mechanism for adapting to challenging conditions. That is why understanding the motives, prescriptions, and functioning of these family unions is important. Behind these practices lie not only fragments of culture, but also answers to many questions related to the formation of the Tibetan world, its traditional economy, and even spiritual life. Analysis shows that these family structures perform vital functions. They ensure stability in times of scarcity, preserve and transmit knowledge, values, and skills, and strengthen collective survival. Recognizing and understanding them in a timely manner means not only uncovering a hidden layer of culture from outsiders' view, but also gaining insight into how traditions, religion, and the harsh natural environment shape the lifestyle of a people who remain a mystery to us, evoking both bewilderment and deep respect. Is it correct to assume that such practices are only remnants of the past or confined to isolated communities? No. Contemporary facts indicate both their preservation and gradual changes due to political shifts, the development of tourism, and even some increased official efforts to confront violations of traditions. But the very idea that in the heart of Tibet, where a family can revolve around a polyandrous practice, exists as proof of how a culture can surprise, break stereotypes, and challenge our notions of morality and human nature. We are not merely witnessing ancient customs, but also observing a vivid example of how human beings adapt flexibly and creatively to their environment, miraculously maintaining their identity while simultaneously breaking conventional patterns. This is what makes the story of Tibet, beyond just mountain peaks and Buddhist temples, a true kaleidoscope of contradictions, a realization that inevitably prompts us to reconsider deeply ingrained ideas about family, morality, and survival. Hidden within every window, every family, and every ritual are answers to questions that each of us should ponder. Beneath the surface, beyond centuries-old traditions, lie human destinies. The struggle for a place under the sun, the search for harmony between the spiritual and earthly, between conventional morality and natural needs. And the choice made here is not merely about family or culture. It is about life and death, about the strength and wisdom that enable survival in a world full of contradictions. In the quiet depths of the Tibetan mountains, where the air is infused with ancient secrets and centuries of refined traditions, exists one of the most extraordinary systems of family relations, shaped over many generations under the pressure of a harsh, natural environment and unique societal realities. It is precisely here, in the villages, where every patch of land is a precious asset and one cannot afford to loosen the ties of ancestral property, that polyandry emerged, a unique form of marital and kinship bonds that today provokes not understanding, but a torrent of questions among Western researchers. But what drove these small communities to completely abandon the familiar bonds, traditional monogamy enshrined in most cultures of the world? What internal mechanisms enable them to sustain such unusual family structures? And most importantly, why did control over natural resources and the preservation of the kinship lineage become the highest values, surpassing even personal feelings and traditional moral norms? The answer lies in the very essence of the Tibetan world, in its social structure and internal logic, in its priorities and mechanisms, which are sometimes incomprehensible from a Western point of view. At the core of it all is land. Not just land as a territory for residents, but its scarcity and the inability to incorporate new participants, new young couples, into existing property. During times when land was genuinely scarce, and each plot could become almost the sole guarantee of survival, dividing inheritance among numerous sons became practically impossible. Imagine, one piece of land, one family, several brothers, and each of them fundamentally dependent on that land for their continued existence and the preservation of family wealth. In such conditions, to avoid unraveling the knots, but rather to strengthen them, compromises had to be found. And the compromise was not in rejecting children, but in adopting a new, complex, and unusual marital and family structure. In these villages, where life revolves around a close-knit family, the eldest brother becomes the most important element of social structure. He is the head, bearer of authority, and holder of privileges, not only by birthright, but also by function. His role is not only to care for the land, but to maintain balance within the family alliance. Every scene from daily life reflects this. In houses where the walls are impregnated with the aromas of herbs and firewood, the elder brother sits at the table. His voice is law, and his decisions are obligatory for everyone else. Younger brothers, often holding lesser status and authority, participate not only in field work, harvesting, or caring for livestock, but also engage in the intimate, vital aspects of family life. They are not merely brothers by blood, but players in a complex game that determines the fate of the clan. The key features are rights and duties. If the man dies or is unable to fulfill his roles, inheritance and the care of the wife pass to brothers or older relatives. A woman in such conditions does not live in isolation. She is part of a living organism, which is additionally supported by her brothers. They help with household chores, care for children, feed, dress, and treat her. And they continue to care for the wife even after the husband's death, taking responsibility for her well-being as a vital part of the lineage. This is not merely a matter of care. It is a social contract rooted in timeless customs. It is especially important to note that these relationships are not casual or based on personal preferences or attachments. They are driven by the necessity to preserve the land, traditions, and heritage. At every moment in the inner life of these families, one can trace the same fundamental need to survive and to safeguard their primary values, the land and the kinship. The reasons behind this complex family structure go even deeper into the socio-economic context. During certain periods of history, when environmental conditions became harsh and political stability was fragile, farming turned into an ongoing struggle. In this environment, the competition among families for fertility-rich land escalated into a genuine war of scarcity. Under such circumstances, interfamily conflicts could destroy the entire social fabric, break down traditional foundations, or gradually lead to their disappearance. To prevent this, the people devised mechanisms to preserve the unity of the kinship and the land. This led to the emergence of polyandry, which allowed resources not to be dispersed but concentrated, strengthening communal bonds and uniting members of different branches of the family into a single entity where each individual was both a part of and served a larger system. However, family structures are not limited to internal kinship ties. Moreover, the intrakin hierarchy permits the encouragement of extramarital relations, which initially may seem paradoxical, since in most societies, extramarital affairs are viewed negatively. Yet in Tibetan villages, where the family is defined by land and kinship preservation, such relations are not only permitted, but actively promoted, especially when they help strengthen connections between different communities and provide social and material benefits. A special role is played by interactions with outsiders, foreigners, who often serve as donors, suppliers of rare goods, symbols of wealth and authority. Their gifts and symbolic gestures, necklaces, coins, large sums of money, become more than mere objects of exchange. They serve as symbols, reinforcing extramarital relations. They strengthen ties with the outside world, broaden social boundaries, create new branches of the kinship, expand its limits, and help preserve and even increase wealth. This unique internal structure reveals how profound and complex their logic was. External relations, internal kinship systems, and family connections are all focused on safeguarding a sphere of life that, under these conditions, is not just existent, but defined by necessity. The boundary between relative, friend, and even stranger essentially erodes, exposing the core value: survival. In this context, the father-in-law, despite strict family rules and rituals, may have the right to intimate relations with his daughter-in-law and even with other women within the family. This possibility is not accidental, but reflects a deep logic of kin preservation, where each participant strives to maintain the primary values, land, kinship, and the continuity of the hierarchical structure. The overall picture that emerges when looking at this social mechanism is a complex, multifaceted cocktail of traditions and rationality, where each thread is woven so tightly with another that tearing it apart is impossible without destroying the entire system. Ultimately, for the people living in these harsh mountain conditions, this is precisely their guarantee of survival. It defines their time and space. It turns their social order into a unique mechanism that has been functioning for millions of years and continues to remain alive, despite external observers' efforts to understand, explain, or even judge it to some extent. The aforementioned logic is not just a theoretical construct. It is the streets, the houses, the voices at the table. It is those forgotten villages where time has stopped, and people continue to live as nature and centuries have taught them. Where the value of the land exceeds personal feelings, where family is not only a blood tie, but a complex web, ensuring the preservation and development of the kin at its very core. This is how the mechanics of ancient traditions operate. And although it may seem strange or even incomprehensible from an outsider's perspective, for those living among these mountains, it is the only correct, justified, and integral part of their survival and culture. This complex, multifaceted world, hidden behind monasteries and mountain peaks, has long become an intellectual challenge, a test for Western researchers. But its true essence lies in its internal logic, deeply rooted in culture, necessity, and absolute respect for the land. In this world, where boundaries between relatives and strangers are blurred, and the concept of family extends beyond the usual, a special system has taken shape. One that is unthinkable without understanding its context, without imagination, and without respect for the informational links that make this way of life possible. In the end, it all comes down to one thing. At the heart of Tibetan polyandry is not only the desire to survive and to keep the land. It is a faith in the power of kinship capable of overcoming any difficulties, unifying people in the most unusual and complex ways, and supporting them on the path of endless, repeatedly reinterpreted continuation of life. Deep within the Tibetan mountains and remote villages lie unique customs and traditions that surprise even the most discerning researchers. Here, amid oases of greenery and winding trails, social threads are woven, intertwined with centuries-old cultural heritage. And at the center of this world are relationships that sound wild to Western ears, but are perfectly natural, sometimes even encouraged, for the local inhabitants. This is especially true for extramarital relationships, which are regarded not only as acceptable, but also, to some extent, as valuable for social mobility and status. Of course, all this sounds unusual to those raised within the cultural codes imposed by urban society. But it is in such contexts that real life unfolds. And it is here, beneath the guise of ethical norms, that an entire system is concealed, in which gifts, symbols, and relationships play a decisive role. Imagine a narrow street in the heart of one of these villages, where every movement carries meaning. Here, a young woman, wrapped in bright fabric, is adorned with numerous necklaces and bracelets made of metallic coins. These embellishments are not mere decorations, they serve as evidence of her romantic connections, her social status, and often her future within this culture. Each coin, each necklace, is not an accidental ornament, but a kind of social passport, signaling to those around her who she is, how many admirers she has, and most importantly, with whom she might forge her destiny. The more jewelry she wears, the higher her reputation. Their quantity acts as a kind of social respect scale, and their value is a vivid testament to her attractiveness and her skill in maintaining relationships. The richer and more expensive the jewelry, the more high-ranking suitors show interest in her, increasing her chances of marrying a worthy partner. Adorning oneself with numerous coins and necklaces is not merely a cultural detail. It is a part of family competition, an element that defines not only personal dignity, but also family status. In these villages, where appearance signifies wealth and social standing, long-standing competitions for attention are divided into stages. The girl's parents, hoping to ensure her better future, begin bringing symbolic and gift-based offerings. After all, in this system of values, beauty is not the only criterion. The quantity, quality, and value of gifts, especially necklaces, are equally important. These ornaments transform from simple decorations into status symbols, a kind of currency capable of unlocking more advantageous marriage proposals. When considering responsibility and consequences, here lies one of the most intriguing features of the local culture. Not only in society's eyes, but also in the consciousness of the participants themselves, extramarital relationships have almost become the norm. When a child is born, sometimes outside of marriage, it is the father who must demonstrate his responsibility. In these Tibetan villages, there is a tradition, upheld by customs and widespread practice. The father of the child is required to spend 2 weeks in the mother's household to confirm his commitments. This simple, seemingly trivial ritual, rooted in culture rather than law, is a testament to responsibility that is informally passed down through generations. It strengthens bonds and proves that even outside official marriage, the responsibility for one's children is a norm, not something requiring formal legal validation. Thus, in this system, where laws often give way to established customs, a father's responsibility is not just a conscientious act, it is a social duty, a mark of courage and maturity. These traditions remain alive to this day, although they are often concealed from outsiders. In remote villages where laws outlined in urban jurisprudence have little effect or are ignored, norms have taken root, under which polyandry and polygamy are perceived as normal. In places where the law does not prohibit polyandry and customs support it, a person can have multiple spouses, and social recognition does not depend on formal marriage contracts. In such a system, where monogamy remains only a formality and wealth and connections are the most important indicators of status, a unique social cocktail is brewing. By 2008, it was recorded that in some of these villages, the proportion of women engaged in polygamous or polyandrous relationships reached nearly 90%. These figures are not coincidental. They confirm an average practice deeply rooted in daily life. They reveal how deeply tradition, culture, and socioeconomic realities are intertwined, creating a distinctive, unique system. The diversity of these relationships generates a special dynamic. Women who carried numerous gifts and jewelry were perceived not only as status symbols, but also as attributes of attractiveness. They had the opportunity to attract multiple admirers simultaneously, effectively competing for the attention of those around them. Some of them, thanks to this, could attain the status of being particularly desirable, becoming the center of attention within their community. Those who possessed wealth and skill in maintaining relationships acquired a kind of super status. They were considered not only attractive, but also influential figures. This is an essential part of their lives, demonstrating that within these depths, the pinnacle of social status is achieved not only through traditional means, but also through mastery in the art of social connections. Reflecting on how such a system functions, one cannot help but wonder, where is there space for genuine feelings in these relationships? Or is it all just competition and show? It seems that here, love itself is not the primary value. Instead, the emphasis is on the ability to demonstrate one's attractiveness, feelings, and worth through gifts, jewelry, and social presence. These customs may appear complex, contradictory, and even cruel to outsiders, but within this culture, they acquire their own meaning, a meaning rooted in respect for tradition, preservation of social order, and responsibility. The evidence provided by these traditions is sincere and irrefutable. They demonstrate that even in the seemingly wild and alien rituals to the Western ear, there is a particular logic, which for the participants is not merely outdated rites, but a fundamental part of their life, their world, and their understanding of their place in society. All of this is crucial to the mosaic, an intricate and seemingly strange tapestry for an outsider, yet complete and alive precisely here, at the border between tradition and modern reality. Such customs not only shape their social space, but also allow us to understand what it means to be part of this culture, what its values are, and how it preserves its uniqueness, even in the age of globalization. Evidence and proof all point to the fact that in these worlds, so far removed from civilizational bustle, principles still prevail. Principles that, although seemingly foreign, remain the building blocks of this secret, special heritage. And within them, one can see not just ancient rituals, but entire systems of meanings which, despite their complexity and contradictions, create a distinctive way of life, an image worthy of careful and serious analysis. Hidden behind the mountain peaks and secluded monastery courtyards of Tibet is an era filled with secrets and mystical practices that still amaze and inspire awe among researchers. These lands, imbued with ancient wisdom and sacred rites, preserve unique rituals related to men's health and longevity, most of which are unknown even to those outside the region. Among them, a special place is occupied by the practice of semen retention, not merely a technique, but a whole philosophy woven into the fabric of local culture, religion, and way of life. This practical form of sex, rich in meaning and symbolism, serves not only for pleasure or fertility, but is also regarded as a powerful tool for strengthening health, conserving vital energy, and maintaining men's spiritual well-being. Cheers and enthusiastic praise for those mastering this technique are not only expressions of admiration for male strength, but also respect for their longevity, mind, body, and their right to inner harmony. In these mountain valleys, a man's value is determined not only by his physical strength, but also by his ability to manage his internal flows, control sparks of passion, and sustain semen retention for hours. What is the meaning here? It is no coincidence that in local legends and tales, the idea is expressed that a man capable of extending sexual acts to many hours is genuinely valued in society, not only from the perspective of personal power, but also socially and spiritually. He is the pillar of the family, a bearer of health and longevity, a keeper of family secrets that bind generations. And what lies behind the scene of this secret ritual? What psychological and spiritual horizons open up for those who master these techniques? The questions posed for centuries in prayers and practices remain relevant today. Against the backdrop of political, economic, and cultural isolation of the region, and behind the Tibetan temples, their own norms and values have developed over centuries. These practices are not just methods of personal self-improvement or health preservation. They become part of sacred rules that connect a person with their land, spirituality, and family bonds. The most important feature is that in these harsh conditions, the meaning of life and health are closely intertwined with traditions passed down through generations for centuries. And these practices are far from being random or superficial. They embody a deep respect for the body, energy, time, and life as a whole. Self-care is expressed through the technique of retention, conscious management of one's internal resources, and it is believed that this is how a person preserves health and energy for many years to come. What does this worldview on sex represent? Why is semen retention perceived not only as a physical practice, but also as a method of spiritual cleansing and energy accumulation? The answer lies in the subtle connection between the body, soul, and the master, who in these practices is not only a man, but also a bearer of tradition, a kind of priest. Such an approach suggests that sexual acts turn into a maneuver for preserving inner strength, which is expended not on superficial pleasure, but on strengthening spiritual and physical harmony. At the same time, this is not just a personal choice, but part of a social contract based on mutual trust and adherence to widespread rituals enshrined in community rules. It is no coincidence that these communities carefully maintain a strict adherence to family and marriage practices. Endogamous marriages are rare, but recognized forms of monogamous unions, where growing young men and women find their partners among their blood relatives or fellow villagers. The peculiarity is that, in conditions of a male shortage, polygynous unions often became the only way to preserve land and inheritance, where one man could have several wives and sisters simultaneously. These unions served not only a social, but also a spiritual function, uniting entire groups of relatives and ensuring the continuity of the family and land. Such a type of marriage is not merely a strategic decision, but an expression of a deep idea of unity and the preservation of collective strength. Internal relationships were governed very strictly. Every decision, role, and duty was subject to strict rules and customs approved by the community and supported by spiritual authorities. What role does semen retention play in these marriage practices? Why is energy preservation considered the most crucial aspect of male health? In conditions of extreme isolation and harsh physical realities of the region, where medicine is limited and longevity is a rare gift, this approach serves as a sensible solution. The technique of retention is not only a way to strengthen physical health, but also to boost internal energy, increase resistance to illnesses, and maintain potency and vitality for many years. Inner balance is achieved through the development of specific tactics, practical skills, and deep internal discipline that allow men to control their impulses and manage their life force. The connection of these practices with culture and spirituality is especially vivid in the reflection that health is not only a physiological component, but a whole spectrum of spiritual and mental aspects. This connection between sexuality, longevity, family, and social care is no coincidence. It is the culmination of centuries-old wisdom, in which physical energy serves as a tool for spiritual development, long hidden from outsiders. These practices involve not only efforts to strengthen men's health, but also the creation of a unique value system, where family bonds intertwine with a sacred understanding of life energy and the path to eternal youth and longevity. Only through these practices, through the union of body, spirit, and earth, can a Tibetan man achieve the harmony that, in their view, prolongs not only life but also his inner light. Thus, deep within unmelted mountain peaks and secluded villages lies a secret, the key to the body, mind, and traditions that allow people not only to live, but also to preserve their vital force for centuries. The ritual of semen retention in these lands resembles ancient ceremonies, symbols, and signs, cells of knowledge passed down from generation to generation. All of this bears witness to the close relationship between health, spirituality, and social structure. They are inexorably aimed at one goal: preserving and multiplying life potential, creating a special energy that exists not only within the individual, but also within an entire culture. In this unique world, where the boundaries of time and space dissolve, practices related to managing internal energy become symbols of eternity for both individuals and the nation as a whole. Within these mountains lies the key to longevity and the heart to inner strength and spiritual awakening. Hidden in the heart of the high Himalayas is not only ancient wisdom of Buddhist monasteries, not only majestic landscapes imbued with a spirit of spirituality and solitude. Behind the impenetrable snow-capped peaks and azure river streams lies an incredible, sometimes shocking fabric of traditional life, which shapes the unique appearance of entire peoples whose way of life predates many modern civilizational norms. Among them is a special reputation, a unique approach to relationships, ruthlessly opposed to Western standards. Tibet is not only the sacred texts of monasteries and the historical monuments that evoke awe among tourists worldwide, it is also a living, breathing socio-cultural layer where family ties are built on very ancient, sometimes astonishing and morally contradictory rules. Practices handed down through generations shape within the community a unique memory, embodied in rituals and traditions, firmly established often without regard to modern ethical norms. And if we attempt to look beyond the famous monastic walls, to witness those lesser-known and often secretive aspects, we will see something astonishing and even shocking from the perspective of familiar Western standards. Practices of polyandry, where one woman shares a husband with her sisters or other relatives, extramarital affairs, and frank attitudes towards sexual practices that do not conform to the norms of modern Western morality, all these phenomena form their own distinct system of family and intimate relations, rooted in rituals and everyday traditions. They are accompanied by specific attitudes towards widowed women and family responsibilities, which often manifest not through institutionalized marriage, but through more complex and frequently hidden forms of connection. In those remote villages, where nothing prevents ancient customs from surviving to this day, the local population often perceives such relationships as natural and unquestionable, part of their deep-rooted worldview, where family ties carry not only legal and ritual significance, but also a sacred meaning. Quite often in those impoverished and isolated regions of Nepal and Tibet, there is an astonishing statistical pattern. Most families operate according to principles that seem decidedly unorthodox to Western observers. These principles allow women to have multiple husbands, women to maintain extramarital relationships, and men to engage in polygamous arrangements that are often not condemned by society. Why does this happen? What is the reason for such an ancient structure that has survived through the ages? At its core lies a deep social framework that prevents the disruption of the balance of power and ensures the stability of the community. These relationships have their own traditions, rituals, symbols, and often a distinct understanding of honesty and love, which contrasts with Western notions. This entire system is the product of millions of years of development, protest, and adaptive strategies embedded in the cultural code of the people and reinforced through rituals. Despite modern influences, external pressures, and globalization, traditional practices continue to be maintained. Sometimes under the weight of external social norms, sometimes in defiance of them, local communities insistently defend their cultural heritage. No one forces them to abandon their ancient customs, as within these traditions lie not just rules of everyday life or religious rituals, they form the framework of their identity. Therefore, it is still quite possible to hear stories from women and men who proudly and confidently speak of their family ties, perceiving them as part of their spiritual and social world. What will happen next? Can international organizations, adhering to modern human rights standards, persuade these peoples to change their established relationship models? Or will the unique cultural identity, which includes these sometimes shocking practices from the Western perspective, continue to survive, rooted in the depths of history? This issue does not seem simple, as it touches not only on social norms and customs, but also questions the very nature of understanding morality, respect for traditions, and the preservation of national identities. These identities have evolved over centuries along a path they knew nothing else, solely driven by their own values. It is not just a puzzle or an anthropological anomaly, it is a live issue of modern times. Time will reveal how this unique part of our heritage will change or remain preserved, and what role global progress and cultural stability will play. It is important not only to preserve traditions, but also to recognize them as part of a rich, complex, and diverse world, where each culture seeks its own way. Our duty is to understand, hear, and properly appreciate the richly nuanced spectrum of human relationships that have been forming in the distant corners of this extraordinary land for centuries, maintaining their unique beauty and deep meaning for those who believe and continue to walk ancient paths.